before the walls of Jericho, before the trumpets, before a single Israelite foot touched the far side of the Jordan, there was a command: destroy them, all of them. 7 nations, older and stronger than you. Show no mercy, leave nothing alive that breathes. It is one of the hardest sentences in the Bible. And for 3,000 years, we assumed it was carried out. The peoples of Canaan were erased from the earth, and they vanished into the ground beneath the Promised Land. Then, a few years ago, scientists opened 5 ancient graves on the coast of Lebanon. They extracted DNA from bones nearly 4,000 years old, and they found something no one expected. The Canaanites never disappeared. They are still here. They may be living in that land right now, in the blood of the very people who call it home. So what really happened to the 7 nations of Canaan? Where did they come from? How long had they been there? And if the command was to wipe them out, why are their descendants still among us? This is the story of a land that would not forget its first people. Open the Bible to Deuteronomy chapter 7. There they are, named like a roll call: the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites. 7 nations. But here is the first surprise. Count the lists again across the whole Bible, and the number keeps changing. Sometimes 10 nations, sometimes 6, sometimes 2, sometimes just one word: Canaanite, for all of them. To the ancient mind, 7 was not a head count. 7 meant fullness, completeness, the whole of a thing. 7 nations meant all of them, the entire world standing in Israel's way. So who were they really? Start with the Canaanites themselves. They were the lowland people, farmers of the valleys, traders of the coast, and they were old. They had lived in that land close to 2,000 years before Israel ever arrived. The Amorites came out of the desert, tribes from the Syrian steppe who drifted in over centuries and settled the rugged highlands. The Hittites are a genuine puzzle. There was a mighty Hittite empire far to the north in what is now Turkey. But the Hittites in the Bible are a small local clan living quietly in the hills near Hebron, selling Abraham a field to bury his wife. Scholars still argue whether the two were ever connected at all. The Jebusites held Jerusalem before David ever laid eyes on it, and their names are strange. Abdi Heba, Araunah. Names that come not from Hebrew, but from the far-off Hurrian tongue. A foreign ruling class perched on a mountain fortress. The Perizzites may not have been a nation at all. Their name seems to mean the people of the open country, the villagers, the unwalled ones, the country folk of the hills. The Hivites hide a mystery of their own. In some ancient copies of the text, their name isn't Hivite at all. It's Horite, the people we call the Hurrians. One tiny slip of a scribe's pen, one letter mistaken for another, and an entire people may have been renamed by accident. And the Girgashites? They are almost a ghost, barely mentioned, nearly lost. Their name survives on a single clay tablet from the ancient city of Ugarit. One whisper of a people the Bible could not quite forget. These were not cardboard villains. They were ancient, layered, living peoples. Some had walked that land longer than Israel would ever hold it. Now, back to that command. Utterly destroy them. If Israel obeyed it, completely, then the Canaanites should be gone. Extinct. A closed chapter. But the earth tells a different story. On the coast of Lebanon lies the ancient city of Sidon. There, archaeologists found 5 skeletons buried in clay jars 3,700 years ago. Middle Bronze Age Canaanites. In 2017, a team led by the geneticist Marc Haber read their entire genetic code. Then they compared it to people living in Lebanon today. The result stunned even the researchers. More than 90% of modern Lebanese ancestry traces directly back to those ancient Canaanites. Not a trace of extinction. An unbroken line. Then came a larger study in 2020. 73 ancient bodies from across Israel, Jordan, and Lebanon. The same pattern, only wider. Most Jewish communities worldwide, and most Arabic-speaking people in the region, carry roughly half or more of that same ancient Canaanite ancestry. Let that settle for a moment. The people the Bible said would be wiped out are, in a real and measurable way, the ancestors of nearly everyone who lives in that land now, Jew and Arab alike. There is a tiny community called the Samaritans, fewer than 1,000 people left on earth. Genetically, they are the closest living population to the Canaanites of the Late Bronze Age. And the Canaanites who lived on the coast? They were never destroyed at all. They became the Phoenicians, the great sea traders who gave the world its first alphabet. The letters you are reading right now descend from theirs. So how do we hold these two things together? The command to destroy and the blood that survived. Here is the honest answer. Even the Bible admits the conquest was never finished. Read the book of Judges, chapter 1. Again and again it says the same thing. They could not drive them out. The Canaanites remained, and the ancient world spoke in thunder. Utterly destroyed was the language of victory, not a literal body count. Kings across the Near East boasted of wiping out enemies who were very much alive the following year. The 7 nations were not erased. They were absorbed and married into, woven in, and the sharp line between us and them, the line the ancient world drew in blood, the DNA has quietly erased. Here is another question. If the land was promised, why was it so hard to take? Ask most people. And they picture Jericho, trumpets, walls falling flat. An easy miracle. The reality on the ground was far harder. The best land, the coastal plains, the wide valleys, belonged to the Canaanite city-states. And those cities had something Israel did not: iron chariots. On flat ground, a chariot was a weapon of terror, fast, armored, unstoppable against men on foot. The Bible says it plainly. Israel could take the hills, but they could not clear the valleys, because the people there had chariots of iron. So Israel was pushed up into the rocky, wooded highlands, the land nobody else wanted. And here, scholars tell a fascinating story. For 100 years, they have argued over one question: where did Israel actually come from? They have offered 4 answers. Some say a swift invasion from outside, the conquest, just as the book of Joshua describes it. Some say a slow, peaceful drift of herdsmen into the empty hills. Some say a revolt, poor Canaanite peasants rising up against their overlords. And many today argue something else entirely, that Israel was never an outside people at all, just Canaanites who moved to the hills and slowly forgot they were Canaanite. These are careful theories. But this channel gives the Bible the first word, and Scripture is not vague. Israel came in from the outside, a people redeemed out of Egypt, a people who crossed the Jordan from the wilderness on the far side. They did not rise up out of Canaan. They marched into it. And here is the quiet wonder. The stones of Israel's own enemies agree. On an Egyptian monument from around 1208 BC, the Merneptah Stele, a pharaoh boasts of crushing his foes. And there, cut into the granite, is the oldest mention of the name Israel found anywhere outside the Bible. Marked tellingly not as a settled kingdom, but as a people on the move. Egypt left another fingerprint too. A century earlier, the panicked kings of Canaan wrote letter after letter to Pharaoh, begging for help against a wave of outsiders tearing their cities apart, border crossers the scribes called the Habiru. We gave that mystery an entire episode of its own. If you missed it, look for Hidden in Plain Sight, the Habiru, the Shasu, and the God of Israel. So how did this people survive in the barren hills? Not with chariots, with ingenuity. They carved cisterns into solid rock and sealed them with plaster to catch the winter rains. They built stone terraces across the slopes to hold the soil in place. They dug pits to store their grain. Quiet technologies, the tools of endurance. But the real challenge was never the chariot. When Joshua was an older man, God told him the truth. Very much of the land still remained to be possessed. The conquest was unfinished. The Canaanites were still there, and that meant the greatest danger was never on the battlefield. It was the temptation to become just like the people next door. So, set the battles aside. Now comes a stranger problem. You have a whole land, and 12 tribes to give it to. How do you divide it fairly? The answer was not a committee. It was a lot. At a place called Shiloh, the tribes gathered before the sacred tent, and they cast the goral, the holy lot, a roll of stones, you might say. But to them it was no game of chance. It was the voice of God deciding who received what. Overseeing it all stood 2 men, Joshua, the general, and Eleazar the priest, who wore upon his chest the mysterious Urim and Thummim, objects used to ask God a question and receive an answer. But there was a puzzle in the numbers. The tribe of Levi received no land. None. The priests were told their inheritance was God himself. Instead of territory, they were given 48 towns scattered through everyone else's land. But if Levi drops out, you are left with 11 tribes, not 12. So the map performed a quiet trick. Joseph, the favored son, was split in 2. His sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, each became a tribe in their own right. And the sacred number 12 was preserved. 2.5 tribes settled east of the Jordan River, Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh, on the wide grazing lands under one condition, that their soldiers cross the river first and fight for their brothers. And woven into the map was mercy. 6 cities of refuge, places a person could flee if they killed someone by accident, safe from revenge until they could stand trial. Justice, built into the geography. But look closely at this map, and it tells the truth about the conquest. Some tribes get crisp, exact borders. Judah, Benjamin. Others get only a vague sketch, and the tribe of Dan never managed to hold its land at all. Driven out by the Philistines, they packed up and migrated far to the north. The map itself confesses that the work was never finished, and underneath it all lay one radical idea. The land did not belong to Israel. It belonged to God. They were only tenants, living on holy ground they did not own. Which brings us back to the hardest verse of all. Devote them to destruction. The Hebrew word is Herem. It does not simply mean kill. It means setting something apart, handing it over completely to God, placing it beyond all human use. To modern ears, it sounds like genocide, and we should not soften the horror of the words. But scholars ask us to hear them inside their own world. Listen to Israel's neighbors. On a stone monument, a Moabite king boasts that Israel has perished forever. Israel, of course, lived on for centuries. This was the standard language of ancient war, total, absolute, and exaggerated. And listen to why Deuteronomy gives the command. Not because of race, not because Canaanite blood was impure. The stated fear was something else. It was assimilation. The danger was that Israel would marry in, adopt the local gods, take up practices the text calls detestable, including the burning of children on altars. The command was not really about hating a people. It was about guarding a calling. Let me pause here and be honest with you. In an earlier episode on this channel, the one on the Canaanites, I framed this command almost entirely as judgment, as the punishment of a wicked people whose cup of sin had finally filled. That is true. The Bible does say it. God waited 400 years. He is patient, and he does judge. But I understand the word Herem more clearly now, and it runs deeper than judgment alone. To place something under Herem was to devote it to God, to lift it out of ordinary hands and surrender it wholly to Him. It is the same word used for the most holy things in the tabernacle, things too sacred to touch, too set apart to be sold or kept. So the conquest was never only about what was being destroyed. It was about whom the land belonged to. Every city placed under the ban was, strangely and severely, being handed back to God, declared His and no one else's. Judgment was part of it. But holiness was the heart of it. And if I once made it sound like nothing more than divine anger, let me set the record straighter now. The command was terrible, but it was not the cruelty of a tribal god. It was the jealousy of a holy one reclaiming what was always his. And for 2,000 years, believers have wrestled with these chapters. An early teacher named Origen noticed something. In Greek, Joshua and Jesus are the very same name, and he read the whole book as a picture of the inner life. The battles fought not against people, but against the sins that wage war inside the soul. Modern thinkers go further still. Some, like Christopher Wright, insist the conquest was a single, unrepeatable moment of judgment, never a license for any nation, ever again. And they point to the sharpest detail of all. The same God who judged the Canaanites later judged Israel by the very same standard. When Israel finally became what it was warned never to become, when it took up idols and injustice and the altars of its neighbors, it too was defeated. It too was driven out. Vomited from the land, the prophet said, into exile. The land was a mirror, and it showed the same face to everyone who broke the covenant. So we come back to the beginning, a command to erase 7 nations, and a land that quietly kept them. The Canaanites were never truly destroyed. Their blood still runs, in Jew and Arab, in Lebanese and Samaritan. Their alphabet still shapes every word we write. Their memory is pressed into the soil of the most contested land on earth. Maybe the lesson was never about the wiping out of a people. Maybe it was always about the guarding of a calling and the terrible ease of becoming the very thing you feared. Because the 7 nations did not simply lose their land. In time, they whispered their gods into Israel's ears. And slowly, quietly, the conquerors began to look like the conquered. The book of Joshua ends in triumph, but the very next book opens the slow unraveling. A generation that forgot, a people who blended in, an age when everyone did what was right in their own eyes. That is where we go next.